Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good now, good future, wherever you may be in the future right now at this point. Today on BetaCodex Live is me, Ryan Erickson, as usual. So you're bored of me by now, and Niels Pflaeging. You will never be bored of Niels. And what we will bring today is a discussion on a few topics. I'll give a little bit of background of how this and why this became interesting to me. There was a discussion of leadership, as often happens on LinkedIn, and the kind of ridiculous stuff that happens, and industrial age thinking, and all this stuff that, as I became aware of the BetaCodex and everything that was beautiful about it, that just soured my thinking on leadership in general, and the idea of this one leader. Like the word leader, I was using it all the time before I came into this place, and not realizing that there's this coercive nature of leading someone, carrot and sticking, and all this kind of stuff, and the thought of free of leaders, full of leaderships, because the multiple nature of leadership types or sources is one of the core principles of the BetaCodex. And I think that to me, all of this stuff came together in that. Well, I think talking about what that means, what are leaderships, what are the theories, what's the theory behind what you mean when stating that, articulating in the BetaCodex as leaderships, which invites OrgPhysics. And well, what is OrgPhysics, and why do we call it OrgPhysics, and all those kind of questions that I have about how this came into being. Hierarchies, networks, and then the value creation structure, the peach, and these concepts of what do they mean, what are they. So where's the question now, and where do we want to launch? I think the first thing is, would you care to do a brief, maybe couple minute definition of what OrgPhysics is and how it relates to the BetaCodex?
Yes. Yes. I mean, the BetaCodex is older than OrgPhysics and much older, and we only stumbled over OrgPhysics in 2011, so a couple of years after the foundation of the BetaCodex network, and 10, almost 15 years after the foundation of the Beyond Budgeting Roundtable. So OrgPhysics came later, but it was how we finally got an answer to the big leadership question. Because in the Beyond Budgeting movement, when I joined in 2003 and I stayed until 2007, we always had this discussion, of course, about leadership and leaders and what it was about. We had discussions about not using the term leadership at all because it's so intoxicated, of course. And then leaders, there's this ambiguity around it. We might talk about this in a moment. So we always thought, and of course, if you look at the leadership literature, even the academic leadership literature, you will find notions like it's an forever elusive topic. We will never find a theory of leadership. And that kind of bugged me and Silke. Yeah. So this idea that we have been talking about leadership for ages, for at least a century. I mean, Mary Parker Follett also wrote about how ridiculous the use of the word was, of course. So we have been using this term over and over, and even more in the last 20, 30, 40 years. But how can it be that there's no theory about it? It really it was bugging me, right? And I had started writing books on leadership in 2006 at the latest. So why was there no theory? Why did everybody claim it was impossible to find something around it? And then we were reading a book by a German author, Reinhard Müller, or something like that. Less known guy. He passed away 30 years ago, and he wrote this book, very intelligent book about organizations and leadership, and so. And somewhere in the middle of this book, there was this graphic that claimed that there were three structures of organizations. Now that kind of got us thinking. Okay, because everybody knows these viral graphics on LinkedIn, etc., where they show the org chart and then saying, oh, in truth, this is really networked, and that there are dots and lines and arrows
Matrices.
Yeah, but not only that, also the informal stuff, like who's having office sex with whom, and that kind of stuff. And of course, we always thought, okay, but if there is one structure that doesn't depict it, then there must be another structure. So with this idea that every organization has 3 structures, it all fell into place, like the puzzle get completed. Yeah, that we have formal structure and informal structure, which is already networked. I mean, formal structure, we know it all, we know everything about it. It's not really a mystery to explain. And this is the structure of hierarchy, formal structure. And then we have influence coming from informal structure, the connections, personal and social connections between people in it. And then the unknown third structure, the mysterious third structure. John Cotter wrote that there was supposedly a duality of structures, and he was talking more or less, it was really fuzzy. In John Cotter's mind, great guy, I admire him very much, brilliant guy, but this idea of a dual structure, it didn't work out the way he described it. There was no clarity, or there is no clarity in the thinking of John Cotter and others in the field about what the second structure is really like. Is it about people liking each other, social informal structure, or is it about value creation? And those 2 things deserve different depictions. So value creation flows from the inside out, but here in informal structure, nothing flows. It's just about people liking each other or hating each other or having office sex and being having solidarity. So this realization, when it came to us, that organizations had 1, 2, 3 structures, and that 2 of them are networked. This is very essential. This is not networked. This is more machine-like. But this one is networked and this one is networked. One might say that every organization is already doubly networked, even if you don't know it. It has informal structure, that's networked, the social stuff, right? Where the social stuff happens, and here where value creation happens. So this structure is called value creation structure, this is called informal structure, this is called formal structure, right? Where compliance happens. Formal for compliance. And that's it. So if you look at how we talk about structures in organizations through the lens of OrgPhysics, it gets ridiculous. We only talk about the compliance or formal structure, and we ignore the informal network and the value creation network that has actually teams here. Teams is a thing from value creation structure, right? And roles and innovation and stuff, all that happens in value creation structure. So this realization, it came to us early I think in 2010. And then we wrote up this white paper, BetaCodex white paper number 11, I think, and that became a hit. It really has attracted a lot of interest. Many people are already using it, and which is very interesting to our topic today. This is actually a robust, a solid, a serious foundation of a theory of leaderships. With this stuff, we can explain what leaderships are: hierarchical or formal power leadership. You know, the leadership that we call it, humbly, we call it compliance leadership, right? So it's not much. It's
role-based.
The formal power of the CEO, etc.
Yeah.
It's very simple, really. And then there is informal leadership. You might call it influence, right? The power of who has a lot of and strong social connections. And the most important leadership in organizations would be this one: value creation leadership or reputation leadership. Yeah? So 3 leaderships come out of these 3 structures, 3 powers exist in every organization. So we actually have 3 leaderships, and not as something people do, individuals do, but as something that happens in the space between people, in hierarchy, in social networks, or informal networks, and in value creation networks and structures.
So then 3 types of leadership, 3 leaderships. Again, that each of those structures, because whether we're dealing about compliance or following rules, again, bureaucracy, and the hierarchy works so well within bureaucracy.
Well, bureaucracy is trying to drive work through formal structure. It's a ridiculous thing. It cannot really work. It gets in conflict, constant conflict with value creation structure.
Yeah. All right. And the bureaucratic hierarchical domination hierarchy. I mean, all of the work, all the words that we hear about that in terms of leader at the top management. Even in Drucker's work, I see the word top management in this idea of top and bottom, right? So that's assuming the hierarchy is in place, and that's the only thing that needs to be dealt with. Oh, I must be a servant leader in this hierarchy and be a benevolent dictator, or I am a transformational leader, or all of these kinds of machinations to try and get yourself. I just accept that there is this hierarchy, and that there are the leaders and the followers, and there's the great grand leader at the top of this structure, right? And so that to me, okay, so that's where the word leader is, and that leader and the idea of following the rules, okay. And then in the social network, right, in the influencer domain, in this, which, and this is one thing when I was trying to do some articulation and sharing of some images to kind of prepare for this session, is it was that I was trying to find out the good articulate, because there are influencers, that the leaders, the people who, so again, the word, I can't help the word coming out of my mouth, because
Yeah,
it's
but why
learned
not
that.
say? But that's the idea of OrgPhysics, that we, of course, it's terribly hard to get used to a more precise vocabulary. For example, when you say top manager, to me it's clear. Top managers are people who have compliance responsibility, like being CEO or CFO, that cannot be delegated. It's a legal responsibility. That's it. Yeah. So that's informal structure. Those people who have.
And it's useful. It's required. It's that there's to exist within a nation state as a legal entity, you must have these names, and they have to have those. Okay.
Exactly.
So, and that's the use of that.
But then top management needs to get out of the way, not to cripple value creation. It's very important.
Right.
Yeah? But once we start calling top managers leaders, we fuck it all up. I like to say, we go to the dark side. It's much better to talk of, in the open space beta concept, for example, we talk about the sponsor, who must be part of top management. Yes. Mm-hmm. But we also need influencers, and we created this term reputationers, or people with mastery. Yeah. So we have a lot of language. I mean, some of the words need to be created maybe, or we have to get used to them because they are strange. But why not call people with value creation power reputationers, and people with influential power in social informal structure influencers, and people here we call them managers. What's the harm in that? I mean, managers, it's a good thing to have them for compliance shit. And I think this, that's why I recommend to literally everyone in this world to drop the term leader. Yeah? It is essentially, it comes from this idea of power over, not power with, as Mary Parker Follett explained. And power with, and a term like leaders doesn't go well, And this, I think, in the English language, too few people care about this notion that leaders suggest top-down, bottom-ups, that kind of relationship, right? And we shouldn't have that. In self-organization and democracy, we don't need leaders. There's a Heaven 17 pop song from the 1980s. Brothers, sisters, we don't need that fascist groove thing. And similarly, I would like to call out here, brothers, sisters, we don't need that fascist leaders thing in organizations. Yeah? We just don't need it. We should be more specific, because, those nerdy people in organizations, like technicians in some committees, or software coders, they have this kind of reputational power wherever they are in the org chart. They can be at the bottom, where the Indians, with regard to formal structures, are there. Because this is a fun way to talk about this. Chiefs and Indians. It's just ironic way of using these terms, of course. And of course, and this talking about organizations is not really helpful to create any value creation or innovation. Actually, impossible to improve anything significant talking in these terms.
Well, I mean, it also puts fear in the organization.
Yes.
Because then you build your incentive structures around that, and then you build the incentive. I want to play nice with my boss, so I can rise through the hierarchy, and then
beautiful. And what innovation can happen in the presence of fear? Not much, right? Only very happen.
Drive the fear out.
We have to drive it out with love, with respect, with influence and reputation, and building our organizations based upon that, and not on silly compliance rules, And our basic hypothesis is that looking at organizations like this does not produce any losers, or it neither leads to laissez-faire nor to anarchy. It leads to more discipline around value creation structure. That's what Toyota has achieved, Southwest Airlines has achieved, W. L. Gore and other of these pioneering companies. Putting value creation first, and then compliance to serve the value creation, and the social stuff within the organization to serve value creation, not the other way around.
Well, and the social, the idea of the influencers, what is being influenced? That they're influencing, what? And if there's no intentional articulation of the value creation, well, what kind of social status? There's influence in terms of social networking and status climbing and all of that kind of stuff. If you don't recognize that the influence structure is in support of the value creation structure.
Yes. But then again, you cannot stop informal structure to happen. You can only do good things to make it. For example, Google is always one of our preferred examples when talking about informal structure. Historically, it has been one of our preferred examples because they, on their campuses, they have these great restaurants. They can bring their dogs to work. All that to smoothen and to constructively stimulate informal structure. This idea of a great workplace, and also this idea of, if people stay at their home office, that's great, but you do nothing at home to smoothen social relationships between people. People will they will be alienated after a while. So, of course, informal structure requires some curation, some constructive work and irritation and formats. Of course, open space gets into that, right? Communication formats like that make it possible to talk about the work, but to also get to know each other, socially, and to encounter each other and to understand each other, to create empathy in the organization.
To be with each other, the whole with us, for us. So how do you become an us if you're not taking part in a group process?
And to encounter
everybody.
Yes, and it also a good organization needs formats of communication in which you can encounter each other in the absence of hierarchy and fear and submission and learned helplessness. So that's also one of the strengths and powers of formats like open space. There are other formats like that, but open space is particularly strong.
And then we talked about structures, the three structures, the three leaderships. The other thing that came to me again through a rereading of the white paper and through the other article was the idea of power. What are the sources of power? And power to me becomes, and then we're talking about authorization, authority. How does authority allocated dynamically in a self-organizing system? And those kinds of questions and I'm trying to articulate what are the power sources. There's positional power, of course, from position and hierarchy.
That's here, right? Positional power. That's format structure. Yes.
Right. And I think in the social network structure that power is influence. Again, that's I don't know of another way to say that in terms of social network power is influence. And the other thing I guess I would say that's a status power, a power of status, social status versus legitimate.
Yeah, they are all legitimate. Power. That's very interesting that you're got stuck in this right now. Yeah. They are all legitimate. All these structures are totally legitimate. Hierarchy is legitimate. Influence is legitimate, and reputation is also legitimate. And this is very important scientifically also, not just. We're talking about this here from a practitioner's point of view, very colloquially, of course, but scientifically, this is by no means a clarified question. The question is power in organizations good or bad? And if you look at physics, it is. It's inevitable. Yes, it is neither good nor bad. It can be bad and very good. In formal structure alone, you can have beautiful stuff arising like solidarity. That's the most beautiful thing, I think. Solidarity. Yeah, but you can also have, backstabbing coming from this. You can have water cooler talk coming from this, and terrible thing like bad mouthing and so on. It also happens socially, right? So, and every organization has valuation structure as well. So reputations might behave badly or well. So top managers might abuse their power very easy. In most organizations, that happens on a daily basis in meetings, for example. Whenever we talk of decision makers, that's such an evil term, really. Decision maker. It implies already that there are some people who make decisions. And
you make decisions.
Cogs.
I have to comply with what you're. I have to agree with your decision.
Decision maker versus cog in the machine, right?
Well, but then there's the idea
Follower.
of
Leader, follower.
Leader and follower.
That's about dogs. That's not about humans, right?
I mean, again, but there's if you don't understand or you don't have the concept of that there are these multiple types of leadership stances, and that you may have social status and influence, but again, within zero position on the hierarchy, or again, you may have a phenomenal reputation, but give not two shits about where you are in the positional hierarchy, or even necessarily that influence. You're an asshole. You have no social influence.
You might be a CEO, asshole CEO, and have zero positive influence and very little reputation. Yeah, that has happened. Many CEOs in this world over time have been sacked from their CEO positions without knowing where it came from, and it often comes from influence, where they are badly connected. Yeah, you're totally right. There's a lot to learn from this concept. Of course, this is powerful theory. This is a way to understand all these phenomena in organization, the social dynamics, the power dynamics, and also why don't we improve? We have reorganized the org chart 1,000 times, and we have called all the big consulting companies. We've reshuffled this upside down, and vice versa. Nothing improved. Well, OrgPhysics explains it perfectly well. Before McKinsey even comes in, parachuting in, people in the organization have already informally secured that nothing will change. It's a big game that's happening, and people are everybody in every organization is involved in all the three structures. So people know how to play their games in all these three structures. And of course, an abuse of formal structure creates no winners at all, except the big consulting firms.
Yeah, except the big consulting firms.
But even top managers these days, I think, are losers in this game of power that they do not understand fully often. Yeah, when they don't understand OrgPhysics, I find that for our clients, for example, it's one of the things that we discuss early on to teach them. Look at power this way, and they say, "Oh my God, this is what's happening in my organization." That's why I don't understand anything. Yeah? This is closely related to Kurt Levin's saying, if you want to fully understand a system, try change it. Yes. It's a great way to understand these structures.
Well, and this is also something that came to me recently. It was in our discussion on the 2nd with Daniel Mezek about this Possywood, this Stafford beer kind of a purpose of a system is what it does. Right. So, and you see, if you have a hierarchical and a social network structure that you're not aware, or at least having any kind of definition around the value creation structure, that you just observe the dysfunction. You deserve the purpose of a system is what it does, and you watch what it does, and then once you bring the idea of the third structure into it, then you can have a more nuanced discussion about what's getting in the way of value, what's getting in the way of that creation. And I okay, so I'll stop there for a second. There's another word that I wanted to bring in here in terms of the Agile discussion. There's a lot of discussion around value streams. Okay. Yeah. And that's value streams and safe value streams, also talking about that in flow through constraints. I don't know where that is specifically articulated in TPS, but that if you're talking about a value stream, they're already alluding to this other structure. You almost get it, but if you try and shoehorn a value stream into a hierarchy, then how many impediments will you uncover? Then if you then if you think, okay, what if we thought, what is the cell structure look like? And so, well, we talk about value creation goes from the center of the cell structure to outward to the periphery, and the steering comes from the market, not from the top of the hierarchy. And see, so this discussion, there are a lot of these pieces that need to come together in terms of, well, if you really want to be an agile leader, right? Or, oh God, use that word again. Use that word again.
That is interesting, right? And there's
agile leadership. So maybe that again, the heart of Agile is, again, a lot of it's missing. And one of the things I want to do, and some of my peers and friends want to bring that heart back, and that is the idea of, I got caught on the heart, but no, at the Agile, the heart of Agile, and okay, I said Agile leader, but what if there were Agile leaderships that in an and this is in a cell structure designed organization, a BetaCodex based, a beta organization, then Agile practices and principles have a much better chance of creating value in the market.
I think this is fantastic contextualization. I think you just articulated that beautifully. That's almost the preface of the book, right? What you just said so beautifully. Now, I think the Agile scene, as the lean movement before it, has often not been highly appreciative of existing theory and not been very knowledgeable about existing theory. For example, I think the first idea, I'm not betting on that it was the first, but the first articulate idea about value chains, as they were called, came from Michael Porter in the 1970s. And he depicted value chains like this arrow to the right, and with the functions and the value stream or chain, it flows over the functions, and at the end there might be there's the whatever outside logistics or something like that. Yeah. So a value chain being something that crosses the org chart, and process management is all about this kind of way of thinking about value creation, to cross the functionally differentiated org chart. So whenever I think Agilists today talk about value streams, implicitly they adhere to Michael Porter's notion of value chains as chains of or processes or process chains crossing the functionally divided organization. And that, in terms of complexity and with complexity, it cannot be connected with complexity. It's or sub-complex, under-complex.
You're trying to manage complexity with a complicated system.
Exactly. And this is one of the great insights, I hope, that comes from OrgPhysics, that to understand actual value creation, you must think of the organization as having a center and a periphery. And the value creation flows from the center, from teams in the center to teams in the periphery to the external client. And this notion cannot be connected with Porter's ancient value chain, value stream, value mapping concept from the 1970s and 80s. It's just, you cannot connect it, because in value creation structure, you need functional integration, not functional division. You see this value creation happening in organizations all the time, but you can never figure out how it works in the org chart, because it doesn't. Yeah, the org chart is only, it's like, you cannot map actual value flow, value creation in an org chart. It's impossible. It's just too dumb. Value creation doesn't happen between accountants. It happens between salespeople and accountants and production people and engineers, and they are
in the supply chain and manufacturing and product and design and all of these things. And this also comes around to the market pull from the periphery.
Yeah.
So that
in the way, functional division is the devil inside, right? That's the devil that, of course, Frederick Taylor got into our heads. At the time, that was fine. It wasn't humanistic, but it worked well enough. Now it's totally toxic. It has become terrible, right?
It's like the guillotine, right?
Yeah. And I think Agilists, they implicitly, they know that functional division doesn't work. Dividing testing from architecture, from coding, from testing, from whatever. It has never worked, right? So we must reintegrate roles or functions into Scrum teams, for example, if you like Scrum. And then you don't have to map this shit at all. It can happen. You can, with the right communication, with some agile, some stand-up stuff, some retrospectives. It can work.
Well, this is the kind of that secret sauce of how can Scrum only really works well with one team, right? And that is a huge.
It's a one-team thing.
However,
don't do Scrum of Scrums is a terrible.
And it's this all attempting to graft on a self-organized one-team process into a very large, complicated structure that has its purpose as hierarchy and bureaucracy.
Agile scaling works on this and ignores this.
Right.
For example, to have a real Scrum of Scrums, you should have teams in the organization paying for other teams' sprints. Yeah. Let's buy a sprint. That's what you would say in value creation structure. Who's paying for the sprint? The external client or an internal client? And Scrum teams would sell their sprints or parts of the shares of the sprint to customers, internal or external. That's what good Scrum would look like in a
and that also
scaled fashion.
And it liberates the idea of product ownership too. I think because if you have a cross-functional, and again, some people all have this crazy notions about cross-functionality doesn't work, blah, blah, blah. And so you have a cross-functional team with a product owner who has a P&L responsibility for that team with them, and negotiating with other product owners who have their own P&Ls for each of their teams, and creating that link from the center through the periphery to the market.
Yes.
And there's also a need for agreements among all of those product owners.
Yes.
That they come to agreement with each other. And then this is where the idea of a product manager comes in, and that are we just going to throw a hierarchy on top of a bunch of product owners and then, Mr. Product Manager, now tell us where to go?
That's this word, exactly.
Yeah, that's that.
Stacking product owners. But the alternative is really to have the product owner as the client buying stuff. And then there would be a conversation between the client and the Scrum team about, okay, how much does it cost? What is the unit of value and so on? What's the quality? What's the delivery and so on?
And that's the whole value. The word value, again, we've kind of touched on it a few times in here, but I think it gets short shrift, and it does because and yes, we were talking about the product owner being the value manager. I remember this meme from years ago. Well, how are you defining value? And then when you have to, if you are a product owner in a typical Scrum team who has been a business analyst, likely it was a business analyst or a tester, shifted over into that role because we did Agile transformation, and now you have a new name. You're going to do the same stuff. You're going to write all the stories and all this stuff, but there's zero training or zero education about what does value mean, what is valuable for this team, what is the economic flow of this team, and what is the entire, who do I need to, there are hints of it if you have a product owner from a Scrum team perspective who has a desire to know the business and is not just a requirements engineer. Then you have a chance to have this understanding of value, this ability to say, I have a profit. What's it mean to have a profit and loss statement for this team? I have no idea what that means. And what is it, competing internally? Well, no, this internal competition versus, again, is all these concepts that open up if you view your organization as the primary function being to create value in the self.
That's the primary function. Very well put. The primary function. And these are secondary functions, but they are inevitable, right? Mm-hmm. You need a compliance structure, so you need formal structure. And people, they socialize. You cannot not socialize as human beings. So these are the secondary structures, so to say, and the primary structure needs to be this one. And if you don't even have the vocabulary in an organization to pronounce this and to distinguish this from formal structure, then an organization is doomed. And then I know a company or two in which they claim that to have no managers anymore. Oh, we don't have no managers. We abolished managers in 2021. And then you ask, how? Because you still need to be compliant, right? So how can you eliminate managers supposedly? And then they tell you, no, they are now called Agile leaders, which supposedly is about value creation, but it's not. It's just a new title to the same damn thing. and just the same overdoing, over formalizing, over driving the organization, over steering the organization. So that really doesn't get us anywhere. We need to understand that and this is of course one of the essences of OrgPhysics. In order to put value creation structure first, we must understand that decentralization is paramount in complexity. It's inevitable. Yeah, we need to decentralize decision making to the periphery. You cannot even think or fathom that in org charts.
You said decision making. So there's a distinction between.
The vocabulary is.
It is, and that's okay. But that we have, if we come to agreement on what that means and why we're talking about it. So there's optionality. So there's an idea between a decision maker. I am the decision maker.
Exactly. The idea of decisions is more about the business, about the daily business. Authority to do the work, to do the business, to create value. That needs to be in the periphery. You're totally right.
Authorized decision rights for teams at the periphery to deliver what the market has, to come into agreement with the people you seek to serve in the market, right? So, and this is how we organize for complexity.
Yeah. An organization that doesn't know the difference between its periphery and center doesn't understand its value creation at all. And that is a tough thing to fathom. Right? Most companies do not have a clue about the nature of their value creation and how it flows from the inside out, which is interesting. It still happens, right? Every organization, even the most command and control, alpha Tayloristic organization, it still creates its value like this, but it has no clue how that happens, how that unfolds. Which is interesting, right? And then other companies like Toyota have a mastery in understanding this. So this is a fascinating subject. I only recommend everybody to take a serious look at this and to also try for a few weeks not to use the term leaders, or a few months, or a few years, or a few decades, not use the term leaders.
Yeah, and you have to think about it. What are we talking about? Are you, in the leading people in the coercion? Well, I think this is a good time. If you want to maybe say a few words and wrap this up, I'll go in and at least say that we do have the white paper, the OrgPhysics white paper number 11.
Two, actually. Two.
Well, there were three. There was the Organized for Complexity trio. Then there was the OrgPhysics specific one, and then you have the LinkedIn article that you wrote.
And there's this white paper number 18, OrgPhysics in Follett's words, the latest BetaCodex network white paper. We also have that, which is because at some point we wanted to trace back, or we figured out, oh my God, Mary Parker Follett had pretty much understood it all, pretty much. Yeah. So that we kind of. It's useful, I think, to understand that this is not just a hunch. This is serious theory. That's why we call it OrgPhysics. That's my closing statement, right? Why did we decide to call this OrgPhysics? Yeah. Because we think this is so foundational. These are natural laws of the organization. Really. We cannot not have compliance in an organization. As social animals, we humans need to socialize. We cannot not socialize. We are informal things.
Social creatures,
yeah. And every organization, of course, it has a purpose, really. Organizations really have a purpose. People, we can discuss this in another session, don't have a purpose, sadly. So this is a trick, but organizations have a purpose. To fulfill that purpose, they need to produce value creation from the inside out. Every organization that's alive does it, but most do it very badly and do not have a clue, do not have a hunch of it. So this is a chance to figure it all out, to figure out what leaderships are, how the powers in an organization combine, how the powers between these structures intervene, intermerge, are interdependent, and how they might support or stifle value creation and success and performance and innovation and, of course, societal advancement.
A human flourishing, maybe.
And human flourishing, exactly. Yes. Flourishing of humanity. Yeah.
Well, this has been a great discussion, as always, every week. Next week, do it at Monday 9 a.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. CET. I think that's 1 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. I'm not sure. I think wherever you are in the world, if you can go back to CET or Eastern, I think you'll get us where we are. 9 a.m. for me, 3 p.m. for Niels. Also, the topics today are maybe a little bit of a hint into a forthcoming quick start, possibly on cell structure design, maybe.
Oh yeah. We have to set this up.
And then also to the qualifications that the core foundational components. Obviously, we
that will not start in September. Exactly. So if you are interested in learning everything about this, cell structure design qualification certification, practitioner certification might be something for you. Get in touch.
Indeed.
We will do this in September.
Excellent. Well, Niels, thank you very much. And to those of you who are out there looking, listening, and wondering what we may be talking about next week, tune in to both Niels and I on LinkedIn, and we will be happy to share more with you. Also, please join us now, this moment, now, whenever you see this. If it is, of course, after 9 a.m. at 9:40 a.m. U.S. Eastern, Niels and I will be going to the betacodex.org/live Zoom room to continue our discussion. And if you want to come talk with us, we'll be happy to interact with you there. So again, be well. Thank you for the precious gift of your time and attention.